Hi everyone, my name is Abhiraj Garakapati. Welcome to my YouTube channel Amazing Abhi.
Don't just hear the story, enter it.
Again after that disaster. On the other hand, Speedweapon misunderstood the whole thing and awkwardly started wondering if this was some severe PTSD reaction from whatever nightmare happened inside the tower. The moment Ryozo noticed him staring, she instantly snapped at him, aggressively asking what he was looking at and whether he had a problem. Speedweapon quietly thought she was always sharp-tongued, but today she somehow felt extra radioactive. Trying to calm her down, he carefully placed a piece of young gang beside her and awkwardly suggested she relax a little, even calling her a good girl while offering it. Ryozo slowly looked at the snack, then back at him with complete disbelief, before immediately smacking him across the face with a pillow hard enough to nearly send his soul flying out of his body. She yelled at him, asking if he seriously thought she was some kind of dog who could be bribed with a single red bean wagashi. Speedweapon held his face in pain, complaining that she really did not need to hit him that hard, before quickly retreating from the room and shutting the door behind him like a defeated stray cat. Once the room became quiet again, Ryozo slowly calmed down and realized she had completely taken her embarrassment out on Speedweapon for no reason. Quietly, she admitted to herself that she should probably apologize later. After that, she leaned back against the hospital bed with a long, exhausted sigh and covered her eyes with one arm while softly muttering that she was alive. Fresh air drifted through the slightly opened window, and the peaceful sounds outside made the reality sink in even harder. She whispered the words again under her breath, saying she was alive, and before she noticed it herself, tears quietly slipped from beneath her arm. Then suddenly, almost like someone rediscovering life itself, she grabbed the abandoned yoneng from beside her and bit into it without even unwrapping it properly. Hunger, relief, exhaustion, survival instincts, everything crashed into her at once. She devoured it like a starving animal that had barely crawled back from death, and despite how ridiculous she looked, a small, grateful smile finally appeared on her face. Through tears and half-chewed red bean paste, she quietly muttered that it was delicious. The scene then shifted outside Ryoso's hospital room, where Gyoma quietly walked through the corridor, thinking about how 3 entire days had already passed since the final exams ended. Both Leon and Ryoso had suffered horrifying injuries during the battle and had practically been standing at death's door afterward. Thankfully, the reckless gamble Gyoma took by activating all of his blessings somehow worked out in the end. Even now, just remembering how close they came to dying still left a heavy feeling in his chest. As Gyoma stopped in front of Ryoso's room, Media's worried expression suddenly flashed through his mind, along with the guilt he still carried for dragging other people into his battles. That realization kept pressing against him harder and harder lately. Strength alone was not enough anymore. No matter how powerful he became, he still needed something beyond simple power if he truly wanted to protect the people around him. Right then, the door suddenly opened, and Speedweapon stepped out while muttering to himself about how he had only been trying to be nice. Gyoma looked surprised to see him there, and immediately called out to him. Speedweapon explained that he was handling watch duty for the day, then jokingly acted touched that Gyoma had personally come to visit him. Gyoma brushed it off casually, saying he had simply been nearby anyway. Speedweapon then revealed that Ryoso had finally regained consciousness. Physically, she seemed completely fine thanks to Gyoma's treatment, but according to him, there was now a completely different problem. Curious, Gyoma asked what happened, and Speedweapon struggled for a moment, trying to describe Ryoso's bizarre behavior. Eventually, he concluded that she had probably developed some severe PTSD after everything that happened inside the tower. Out of nowhere, she had started screaming, thrown a pillow directly at his face, and somehow become even more aggressive than usual. What confused him the most was the fact that she even rejected her favorite snack, which honestly felt more alarming than anything else. Hearing all of that, Gyoma quietly thought it sounded less like trauma and more like proof that Ryoso had made a perfect recovery. The conversation soon shifted toward the villain investigation. Gyoma asked how the search was progressing, and Speedweapon explained that Rachel had gone out of her way to help them, allowing the investigation to move forward much faster than expected. He then handed Jioma a list containing the names of several suspicious individuals, most of whom held surprisingly high positions within the academy itself. As Jioma scanned through the paper, his expression turned more serious. There were 6 names in total, yet not a single professor appeared among them. He immediately realized there had to be more people involved behind the scenes, but eliminating these suspects would probably expose the rest eventually. Wanting confirmation, Jioma asked whether Speedweapon was certain about the people listed there, and Speedweapon firmly assured him that the information had already been verified. After thinking quietly for a moment, Jioma asked whether Speedweapon was free after school tomorrow. Speedweapon replied that he was available, though he also pointed out that since Ryoso was awake now, maybe the group should visit her together instead. Jioma immediately understood how badly that idea would backfire. Knowing Ryoso's personality better than most people, he explained that she was absolutely not the type to feel happy about everyone suddenly crowding around her hospital bed. The explanation instantly made sense to Speedweapon, and his curiosity quickly shifted toward Jioma's real intentions for tomorrow. Jioma slowly tightened his grip around the paper in his hand while his expression hardened. After spending so long reacting to attacks from the shadows, he had finally decided it was time for them to move first. Their turn to go on the offensive had finally arrived. The scene then shifted to Media's office, where the atmosphere already felt heavy before anyone even spoke. Altair revealed that among the elders, Clate was confirmed to be the main culprit behind the recent incidents. According to him, Clate had manipulated the others and was also the mastermind responsible for the demonoid appearing during the midterm exams. Media immediately questioned whether the final exam incident was connected as well, but Altair explained that the investigation into that part was still ongoing. However, they had already uncovered transaction records proving that Clate secretly hired the Undertakers. That darkened instantly. Rage exploded out of her as she cursed the Undertakers as filthy subhuman killers. Altair continued by revealing that the group was last spotted near a port close to Avalon Island, which only made Media's frown deep and even further. The involvement of Avalon Island clearly bothered her more than she wanted to admit. Meanwhile, Siegfried remained unusually calm the entire time, leisurely sipping tea while Media burned with anger beside him. That calm attitude only irritated her more. She vented her frustration about how impossible it was to stay composed while people inside the academy itself were endangering students, despite all the precautions they had taken. As chairman, the safety of every student was her responsibility, and the fact that someone from the Council of Elders was involved made the situation even worse. Siegfried slowly placed his teacup back onto the saucer and quietly reminded her that she was not the only one angered by this situation. His own granddaughter was also a student at the academy. Then his gaze shifted toward Altair and Media followed it immediately. Without even opening his eyes, Siegfried calmly asked whether they had enough evidence to act. Altair responded without hesitation, explaining that they had spent the past 2 months verifying every piece of information. According to him, there would be no problems even if they eliminated the targets immediately. Hearing that, Media fixed her eyes on Siegfried, silently waiting for his decision. Slowly, he opened his eyes, golden light glowing from within them as a terrifying aura suddenly burst out of his body. The pressure alone shattered the teacup resting on the table. Even Media and Altair froze for a second as unease crawled through the room. Siegfried then calmly declared that they would strike tonight, but right as the decision was made, the office door suddenly opened after someone announced an urgent matter. Everyone looked over and surprised and saw Jioma entering. Alongside Speedweapon, Media immediately questioned why Jioma was here, and Jioma explained that, besides the final exam incident, there was something important he needed to report. Afterward, Speedweapon carefully explained everything they had uncovered regarding the final exams and the undercover villains hidden inside the academy. The room stayed completely silent as everyone listened. Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Apai grow naturally. Once he finished, Media suddenly smiled and casually mentioned that although she already knew Speedweapon was part of the travel club, this was actually her first time meeting him personally. Hearing someone as beautiful and intimidating as Media speak to him so casually instantly made Speedweapon flustered. Media then lifted the list of suspects and asked whether The people written there were likely connected to the half-demon faction. Speed Weapon quickly confirmed that every investigation into those individuals had exposed suspicious hiring records and abnormal work histories. Medea immediately activated her blessing to verify the authenticity of the information herself. After checking the list personally, she concluded that those people had definitely not been officially hired by the Academy. The moment Gioma heard that confirmation through Medea's blessing of the poet, he knew the information was undeniable. The others listened carefully as Medea's expression suddenly turned serious again. Her attention shifted toward the two students, as she questioned how exactly they even managed to access the Academy's faculty records in the first place. The atmosphere instantly became awkward. Speed Weapon visibly panicked while Medea pressed harder for an explanation. Unsure how to respond, Speed Weapon quietly glanced toward Gioma for help. Without hesitation, Gioma stepped forward and admitted that both of them hacked into the Academy's network under his orders as club president. Medea looked genuinely skeptical that two students could infiltrate what was considered one of the most secure systems on the planet. Even while panicking internally, Speed Weapon stayed quiet as Gioma continued explaining that although Speed Weapon usually acted carefree, he was still one of the top-ranked students academically and extremely talented with computers. Gioma admitted the hacking the network was wrong, but they had no time to waste before the school break started. In the end, he trusted that Medea would understand why they made that decision. Medea let out a long sigh before deciding to overlook that incident because of the circumstances. However, she firmly warned them never to attempt something like that again. Gioma thanked her calmly while Medea admitted that the only reason she trusted them was because of everything Gioma had accomplished until now. Any normal student would have been expelled immediately for doing something like this. The moment the situation settled, Speed Weapon finally released a huge sigh of relief. Watching him, Gioma quietly realized how much Speed Weapon had supported everyone lately. Even after everything happened, he never exposed the situation involving Ryozo and stayed loyal until the very end. The longer Gioma spent time with him, the more he realized what a genuinely good friend Speed Weapon really was. Then suddenly, Siegfried broke the silence by revealing something even more alarming. According to him, the villains were still planning to target the elders tonight. Hearing that immediately shocked the students while Medea shot Siegfried an irritated glare, practically telling him to shut up without saying a word. However, Altair pointed out that the students deserved to know the truth at this point. Siegfried then explained that they originally planned to visit Cletty's personal quarters tonight. Gioma looked confused, so Siegfried elaborated further. The Council of Elders had been responsible for spreading rumors and targeting Gioma along with his friends, and Cletty orchestrated most of it personally. Thanks to information gathered through the auditors, they finally secured enough evidence to confront them directly. Still, Siegfried admitted there was a problem. Despite all the proof, he was currently no longer one of the 7-star heroes, meaning he was still bound by political rules and restrictions. Gioma quickly understood the issue, no matter how justified the attack might be. Openly targeting members of the Council of Elders would shake one of the largest power structures in existence. Siegfried then revealed the biggest concern of all. If they moved against the Elders tonight, the hidden villains inside the Academy would immediately flee before they could capture them. Medea agreed that once those people escaped, tracking them down again would become nearly impossible. At the same time, they also could not allow the corrupt elders to continue operating freely. As Gioma listened to both sides, he quickly realized the only solution was to strike both groups at the same time. After thinking for a moment, he calmly declared that he could gather every single one of them into one place at once. The moment those words left his mouth, everyone in the room stared at him in surprise. Without wasting a second, Gioma immediately contacted Choi Saola. On the other side of the call, she was casually chewing on some disgusting worms before hurriedly answering the phone. Confused, she asked what was going on, and Gioma reminded her that, although she previously claimed not to know the names or identities of the others involved, she also mentioned there were still a few exceptions. Choi Saola confirmed that part, but her expression instantly changed once Gioma revealed that every name he was about to give her belonged to actual villains. He instructed her to gather every single one of them immediately. Although she agreed right away, she still looked confused about how exactly she was supposed to pull that off. Gioma simply mentioned the lucky letter, which only left her even more puzzled. Before the call ended, once that issue was handled, Siegfried turned toward Jioma and carefully summarized the plan forming in front of them. While the auditories, who possessed the authority to prosecute nobles, would raid Claddy's personal quarters, Medea and Siegfried themselves would attack the location where the hidden villains gathered. Without showing the slightest hesitation, Siegfried immediately approved the operation. Medea, however, still looked unconvinced. She demanded to know how Jioma even planned to gather all the villains into one place so suddenly. Before Jioma could answer, Siegfried calmly called out her name, signaling for her to stop digging any deeper for now. Understanding the situation, Jioma apologized to Medea and explained that they needed to move first while time was still on their side. According to him, he would explain everything. Afterward, hearing that, Altair stroked his beard while quietly remarking that Jioma's tendency to execute plans before explaining them made him feel far closer to the auditories than to ordinary heroes. The atmosphere lightened slightly after that before Siegfried shifted the discussion toward preparation. He asked Altair how many men he had brought from Sicily, and Altair revealed that he came with 8 of their strongest elite auditories. Siegfried quickly summarized the balance of power in his head. The Council of Elders possessed their guardian knights, while their side would move with 8 elite auditories supporting them. Right then, Jioma suddenly stepped forward and calmly declared that he would personally accompany the auditories during the strike against Clate. The statement immediately shocked Medea. Jioma, however, remained completely firm. He'd explained that he was one of the direct victims of Claudi's crimes, meaning he had every right to stand there himself. At the same time, he openly declared that he was the future 7-star hero destined to succeed the Sword Emperor someday. The sheer confidence behind those words stunned everyone in the room into silence. Siegfried quietly remarked that Jioma had finally made up his mind, and Jioma confirmed it without hesitation. The scene later shifted again as the clock neared 3 in the morning. The time to strike had finally arrived. Jioma and Speedweapon stood quietly near the windows while the academy slept under the darkness of night. The tension in the air felt heavier than ever. After hesitating for a moment, Speedweapon carefully asked whether Jioma truly intended to go through with this personally. Jioma glanced toward him briefly before turning toward the exit without a trace of doubt in his expression. He simply told Speedweapon to stay behind and wait since the entire operation would not take long. As Jioma walked away into the darkness, Speedweapon quietly called out one last warning, telling him not to push himself too hard. The scene then shifted elsewhere, where several hidden villains simultaneously received a strange message from an unknown number titled, Letter of Good Fortune. The message claimed that the letter originally came from the country of Maple, and supposedly brought fortune each year to those who received it. According to the final lines, the letter had now completed its journey and reached its final recipients. Since they had already read it, a terrible misfortune would arrive for them tomorrow morning at exactly 3 o'clock. The moment they finished reading it, the group immediately realized the message had come from the professor. One of the men instantly lost his temper and kicked the wall in frustration, furious that the bastard was sending them this kind of nonsense, as if they were complete idiots. Meanwhile, a fat man nervously admitted that despite how ridiculous the message sounded, it was definitely from the professor. The glasses-wearing man became even more irritated after hearing that. He raged about how the professor treated them like disposable underlings, and swore that this time he would finally put that arrogant bastard in his place. Hearing all that tough talk immediately made another villain burst into laughter, mocking him for suddenly acting brave despite the fact that he rushed there the second the message arrived. The glasses man instantly became defensive, and awkwardly denied being scared at all. The blue-haired villain did not even bother arguing with him. Instead, he casually admitted that he also hated the professor, but realistically, there was nothing they could do besides obeying orders. However, after glancing around the area, he suddenly grew suspicious. According to the message, everyone should have gathered there by now, yet several people were still missing. Right then, the sharp sound of high heels slowly echoed from the darkness nearby. The glasses guy immediately assumed the final person had arrived and casually walked toward the shadows while impatiently telling them to hurry up before the professor lost his mind over delays. Meanwhile, the blue-haired villain's instincts suddenly started screaming that something was wrong. He realized he could not sense any mana from the approaching figure at all. His expression immediately changed as he urgently warned the glasses man to stop moving forward, but he reacted far too late. A horrifying scream suddenly tore through the darkness, instantly putting everyone on edge. Then a blood-covered hand came flying out from the shadows, before crashing onto the ground. The villains froze in horror, as a woman slowly stepped out from the darkness while calmly holding the severed head of the glasses man in one hand. Panic instantly spread through the group, as they demanded to know who the hell she was. Before we move ahead, please take a second to share on this video. Sharing helps this video reach friends who may also enjoy anime, gaming, travel, cricket, chess, career basics, or personal stories. Your support helps Amazing Abhai grow naturally. The woman continued walking toward them, without the slightest trace of fear or hesitation. Her voice remained disturbingly calm as she remarked that while they had been drowning in chaos, she had apparently been the one drowning in peace this entire time. Then she greeted the villains as scum with complete indifference, as if their deaths were already decided. The scene then shifted once again to another location where Jioma and Altair had finally arrived near Claddy's residence. Hidden deep within the woods, the atmosphere felt unnaturally cold and silent. As they moved through the darkness, Altair suddenly remarked that Jioma was an unusually peculiar young man. Jioma looked slightly confused by the statement, so Altair calmly elaborated further. Out of everyone he had ever met, Jioma was the only person he genuinely could not read. No matter how much he observed him, he could never figure out who Jioma truly was or what kind of thoughts hid behind those dark eyes. Considering Altair's profession and experience reading people, that alone said far more than normal. Jioma simply stared at him silently while Altair continued studying his expression. According to him, Jioma's pitch-black eyes looked completely empty, almost as if his emotions, desires, and even his humanity itself had been carved out and replaced with something colder, sharper, and lifeless, like a blade forged from coal. Then Altair suddenly asked him a strange question about what truly separated humans from monsters. Jioma remained silent, waiting for him to continue. Altair then quietly revealed his answer. According to him, true monsters were creatures that genuinely believed themselves to still be human. Hearing that comparison directed toward him made Jioma question what any of that had to do with their current mission. Altair did not answer immediately. Instead, he simply stared silently at the moon hanging above the forest for several long seconds, before finally telling Jioma one simple thing. No matter what happened from this point onward, he should never become a monster. The moment those words settled into the silence, Altair lightly tapped his cane against the ground. Instantly, 8 elite Auditoris emerged from the surrounding shadows like ghosts, materializing from the darkness itself. Jioma immediately noticed Nox standing among them, and remembered Altair previously mentioning that these were the finest elite Sicily had to offer, the absolute pinnacle of the night arts. Then Altair's expression completely hardened as he issued his command. In the name of the House of Order, the Auditoris were ordered to pass judgment upon the corrupted. The scene then returned to the villains, as the severed head of the glasses men suddenly came flying through the air, before crashing across the ground in front of them. The group instantly froze in tension, while Medea calmly stepped forward, casually counting how many flies still remained for her to crush. At that moment, her true identity became painfully clear. She was Sage Medea, a veteran who survived countless wars and battlefields while hiding behind the appearance of a woman still in her 20s. One of the orange-haired villains immediately released his mana and warned the others not to be fooled by her appearance. According to him, Medea was just an old fossil who had not stepped onto the battlefield in over 40 years. Then, with arrogant confidence, he showed off the power supposedly granted to him by his master, before recklessly charging straight toward her. Medea merely looked intrigued by his confidence. A thin green line flashed through the air as she calmly prepared her fist. In the very next instant, the villain's body split cleanly in half. Before his upper body could even fall, Medea raised her leg, caught the severed corpse against it, and brutally slammed him into the ground. At the same time, her aura exploded outward with terrifying force. The entire structure began violently trembling under the sheer pressure, while the villain beneath her was crushed into a bloody mess so thoroughly that nothing recognizable remained. The surviving villains could only stare with their mouths hanging open in horror. Among the 7 stars, Medea was the only one without a defined role or title, which alone made her abnormal. Her other name was Tyrant Medea. With bloodshot eyes burning with violence, she simply demanded the next victim. One of the fat villains desperately tried attacking her from behind, but before he could even touch her, a blue flash suddenly tore through the darkness. In the next second, his body split apart cleanly in half. Siegfried calmly appeared nearby, while casually remarking that Medea still never held back during fights. Medea barely reacted, only commenting that he took long enough to arrive. The remaining villains completely lost their composure after realizing the Sword Emperor himself was also present. Siegfried briefly noticed Medea's outfit, and quietly remarked that she still had not discarded those clothes after all these years. Hearing that, Medea briefly recalled the battlefield they fought on together 4 decades ago, along with the countless comrades they lost during the war. Her expression darkened slightly as she admitted she never forgot any of it. Meanwhile, the blue-haired villain snapped at the others, calling them lunatics while demanding they stop panicking and release their mana already, but Medea had already lost all patience. She charged toward them without hesitation, like a tyrant unleashed onto a battlefield once more. The scene then shifted back toward Clate's residence. A knight stationed outside suddenly noticed one of the lamps had gone out. Annoyed, he walked over while grumbling to himself about how quickly the lamps burned out despite being left on throughout the night. He complained about how Lord Clady had endless wealth, yet acted stingy over insignificant expenses, leaving him wondering whether he was employed as a knight or just a damn electrician. The moment he finally fixed the lamp, his head silently separated from his body. Before the corpse even collapsed, the unseen assailant had already vanished back into the darkness. As the severed head rolled across the ground, Geomac calmly walked past it alongside Altair, as if the scene meant absolutely nothing to him. One of the nearby knights finally noticed their approach, and immediately shouted a warning toward the others, most of whom still had no idea what was happening. Altair coldly ordered the auditoress to clear the path. Instantly, the assassins positioned themselves on both sides, silently making way for Geomat to advance forward. The knights immediately realized the impossible had happened. The auditoress had breached the compound itself. Geomat slowly closed his eyes and continued walking forward without hesitation. The first group of knights charged directly toward him, but before they could even reach striking distance, the auditoress instantly reduced them to pieces. Geomat continued, walking without slowing down once. Another wave of knights rushed him moments later, only to meet the exact same fate. Bodies were carved apart around him, while Geomat calmly advanced through the slaughter completely unfazed. One desperate knight lunged forward alone and aimed his sword directly at Geomat, but the auditoress erased the threat before the blade even came close. At that point, the remaining knights completely broke down in terror. Some started fleeing while screaming for help into the compound. Geomat slowly opened his eyes again, only to find every single knight already dead around him. He had crossed the battlefield without personally facing even the slightest resistance, watching the massacre unfold so effortlessly. Altair quietly remarked that regardless of how classified the operation was, executing an elder of the council was still no small matter. Geomat then questioned whether Altair truly felt no concern despite the massive risks involved, even with undeniable proof backing them. Altair calmly explained that the House of Order existed to act upon corruption, now that they possessed undeniable evidence. Refusing to move would itself become the greater crime. Besides that, Geomat's presence changed everything. With the future successor of the 7 stars standing beside them, there was nothing left for them to fear. Right then, Nox suddenly appeared and reported that every unit had already infiltrated Clate's office area. The group finally arrived before a large door hidden deep within the residence. Altair asked whether that room was truly the target location, and Nox immediately confirmed it. Still, Altair quietly noted that the silence inside felt unnatural. Everyone then turned toward Geomat, silently waiting for, "Before we move ahead, please take a second to like on this video. A like tells me that you enjoyed this topic. Your support helps Amazing Apai grow naturally." Him to make the next move. After taking a moment to steel himself, Geomat slowly placed his hands against the door. Then without hesitation, he finally pushed it open. As they entered Clay's office, the entire room felt unnatural silent, and the atmosphere alone immediately put everyone on edge. Then suddenly, one of the elite auditors stumbled toward Altair in panic while clutching his broken arm. Altair calmly ordered him to settle down and explain what happened. The assassin tried speaking about the others, but before he could finish, his face suddenly twisted and deformed before his upper body exploded apart right in front of them. The horrifying sight instantly shocked everyone in the room. At that exact moment, the lights flickered on, revealing a gruesome scene. 7 of the 8 elite auditors were already dead. Nox immediately shouted in disbelief at the sight of his fallen comrades, but Altair sharply ordered him to suppress his emotions. Even so, Gyo-ma could clearly tell that Altair himself was barely holding back his own rage. Then, several figures slowly stepped out from the shadows, while casually applauding the scene in front of them. One of them mockingly praised Altair for still telling his subordinate to hide his emotions, even after witnessing such slaughter, sarcastically wondering whether the leader of the auditors was simply incapable of feeling anything at all. The 6 villains standing there looked completely relaxed and smug about the massacre they caused. Nox exploded in fury and screamed at them for murdering his brothers, but the apparent leader casually stepped forward and coldly told him to stop interrupting while adults were speaking. Then, with disgusting mockery, he tossed a severed hand toward Nox and sarcastically suggested he keep it safe since it belonged to family. According to him, he originally considered taking the remains as souvenirs, but carrying them around would have attracted too much attention. Hearing those words finally shattered Altair's restraint. Rage exploded out of him as he screamed at them in fury. The villain leader simply grinned in amusement before casually remarking that there it was, the emotion he had been waiting to see. Then, his attention shifted toward Claddy, while mockingly asking whether he agreed. Claddy slowly stepped forward with complete arrogance, claiming that he would never dare question the judgment of such great villains. He openly admitted that the existence of the auditors disgusted him and sneered at Altair for trying to stand among nobles, despite being nothing more than a butcher in his eyes. Hearing that instantly made Altair explode again, as he cursed Claddy for joining hands with demon-loving vermin, despite being an elder himself. Claddy immediately snapped back in fury, screaming that a lowly butcher had no right to lecture someone from the Council of Elders. He even vowed that after tonight, he personally intended to wipe out the entire Auditoris bloodline himself. Altair retaliated by calling Claddy a parasite, feeding off demons, and declared that Claddy's own father would feel ashamed of him if he saw what he had become. Those words visibly shook Claddy. Before the argument could spiral even further, Gyo-ma quietly called out to Altair, helping him regain a little composure. Claddy, however, remained furious and demanded to know how someone as lowly as Altair dared to mention his father at all. The villain leader finally grew irritated by the pointless screaming and casually placed a hand on Claddy's head while warning him in a threatening tone to stop embarrassing himself already. The moment the pressure shifted toward him, Claddy instantly quieted down. Then the leader's attention slowly moved toward Gyo-ma. Stepping forward, he calmly observed him while speaking about the golden generation that had shaken academy history. Among all the monsters within that generation, Gyo-ma stood at the very top after effortlessly claiming first place. The villain leader also referred to him as another vessel candidate before offering a twisted proposal. If they handed over Leon and Gyo-ma willingly, the villains promised unlimited glory in return. Gyo-ma never responded. Instead, his attention remained fixed entirely on Altair for a few moments before he slowly turned his gaze toward the villains. The instant his eyes met theirs, a crushing pressure filled the room. Even the villain leader looked confused for a second because this situation was turning out far differently from what he expected. What should have been an easy confrontation suddenly felt dangerous. Meanwhile, Claddy completely failed to understand the shift in atmosphere and arrogantly screamed at Gyo-ma for daring to glare at them despite being nothing more than a commoner. He proudly declared that, without media protecting him, Gyo-ma's life would end tonight. Gyo-ma silently stared at him while cold thoughts ran through his mind. Elder Claddy had continuously targeted him from the shadows alongside all the undercover villains who failed to uncover his true nature. To Gyo-ma, there would never be a better moment than now to settle every single debt at once. Without hesitation, Gyoma slowly unsheathed his sashimi knife calmly. He declared that the villains' necks would belong to the auditories, while he himself would deal with the magic. The villains immediately burst into laughter after hearing that. They mocked him for bringing nothing more than a kitchen knife into a battle against magic users, wondering what exactly he planned to cut with such a ridiculous weapon. Then Gyoma activated the blessing of the sword god. With absolute confidence, he slowly walked toward them, and silently answered their question through his actions alone. The villains immediately attacked, first, unleashing a barrage of different magic spells toward Gyoma and the auditories. Explosions tore through the office as the entire room became heavily damaged within seconds. Thick smoke rapidly swallowed the surroundings, while the shattered lamps made visibility even worse. Watching his office get destroyed in the middle of the chaos, Claddy completely lost his temper and screamed at the villains to stop attacking already, since that amount of firepower should have been enough to kill everyone several times over. However, the leader ignored him entirely and simply ordered the others to finish the job properly. Right then, one of the masked villains spotted figures standing inside the smoke and immediately lunged forward, while arrogantly claiming he could already see where they were hiding, and that the fight would be easy from here. The next second, he got sliced apart, just as easily as the cake he bragged about. The auditories handled him effortlessly, seeing that, instantly confused the villain leader, because Gyoma and the others did not even have a scratch on them. For a moment, he genuinely wondered whether all the magic somehow missed. Furious, he started screaming at his subordinates for being idiots and demanded they aim properly this time. The villains unleashed another barrage immediately, but Nox vanished before the attacks could land and suddenly reappeared, directly in front of the sleek-haired villain. The leader panicked and warned the others, causing the fat villain to quickly create a massive boulder before hurling it toward Nox. But before the attack could interfere, Gyoma casually sliced straight through the magic with his sashimi knife. The shattered boulder exploded apart instantly, leaving the villain stunned that someone had actually cut through magic itself. The sleek-haired villain froze in disbelief for a split second, and that single moment was enough for Nox to send him straight to hell. At that point, the villain leader finally started feeling uneasy. He instinctively moved behind his own subordinates while desperately yelling at them to keep attacking. Even the fat villain looked confused and questioned why their leader was hiding in the back now. The man awkwardly stuttered out a pathetic excuse about overseeing the battle from a safer position. Meanwhile, the two female villains became strangely excited at the opportunity to spam powerful magic freely without restrictions. Laughing wildly, they unleashed fire and ice attacks together at the same time. Unfortunately for them, both spells collided mid-air and instantly canceled each other out in a massive burst of steam. The two idiots immediately started arguing with each other for firing simultaneously, like complete morons. The moment the ice girl turned away during the argument, Altair instantly sliced off the four-eyed bitch's head. Before anyone could react, he immediately moved again and eliminated the ice user as well. Calmly, he remarked that only fools took their eyes off the enemy during battle. The fat villain then tried ambushing Altair from behind, while sarcastically mocking him for ignoring threats around him. But Gyoma instantly cut apart the magical arms he created before the attack could even reach Altair. Watching the pathetic attempt, Altair quietly muttered that the weak never understood silence. Nox immediately followed up by severing the fat villain's legs, and Altair delivered that, "If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Amazing Up High. Subscribing makes sure you do not miss the next video, and it gives me motivation to keep improving the quality of every upload. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next one."